So this is the 5th year for doing this. We're doing it all wrong. I had this idea probably 10 years ago. Had no idea, what exact pieces would be in it, but I just knew things were so bad. I just wanted to address it, or wanted to let artists address it. And every year it's been so interesting and impactful. I think there's 40 pieces in here. 43 were juried in by myself and Devan Horton out of Northern Kentucky.
Hi, I'm Amy Zaleta Martinez, and I come from Los Angeles, California. And I've been here all week because I dropped off the painting on the 29th, and I'm going to be leaving tomorrow after the show. My painting is the Tibetan, which is at the front of the coming in. So I painted the Tibetan, but it's really a larger series about statelessness within the world as well as within the United States. Statelessness is, if you don't know, is not having a country. So some people have immigrated and then the country changes names and then there's nothing to put on paperwork and people end up in the bureaucracy and end up perpetually stateless. Some people have been refugees and come in, and people generally are legally going through all the processes when they arrive, and then something goes wrong, and then they could have all the paperwork, and then the dad dies in the process, and then the kids are left here with nothing and no country to go back home to a lot of times. So I was inspired by, there's statues outside the Musée d'Orsay. They represented all the continents, and that's how I started my study. I was wanting to redo those, and instead I realized everybody categorizes continents differently, and then it got into, well, what are borders and what are continents and what are countries, and that's when I stumbled upon statelessness. So I started these in 2020. I have about 21 of them that are still with myself. I looked at the UN. There's 80 countries that the UN recognizes as stateless around the world. Then I found out that there's stateless people that live within the United States as well. And so I contacted the organization called United Stateless, and they work with the UN, and they were working with Congress on the Stateless Protection Act. So any sales of my paintings goes back to them for legal fees, because right now they just eliminated everything, and they're no longer in the works of getting anything together. And usually they make appointments. If they find out that they're stateless, they go into detention for whenever they feel like releasing them, and currently it's not happening at all. So but the Tibetan, so I did in a travel poster style. I put all the nationalities in their original costumes of what their traditional costumes were in their region, and in the background I did it ironically of a travel poster that's their original land of where they're from. And on most of them, I'd say 90% of them, I did the colors of their flag, because they all have national flags as well. So that's the group. Well, I also painted 3 portraits of women that live within the United States that are affected by statelessness as well.
Hello, my name is Zoe O'Brien. My piece Rolling Done is featured in this year's We're Doing It All Wrong exhibition. This piece is an act of resistance against the current administration taking away human rights, specifically the right of abortion and Roe v. Wade being overturned. I want you to remember that resistance is the most important thing during the rise of fascism, that choosing your voice in creation is crucial in a time of censorship. This piece has had quite the backstory behind it, and I wanted to share it with you. This sculpture was originally a painting, but was vandalized by a fellow student in the name of patriotism and traditional American family values. During a polarized political climate like the one we're currently in, even artists are being turned into agents of the state, perpetuating censorship. When it was vandalized, new life was really breathed into this piece, from a painting into a sculpture. Because the original form was ruined, I had to pivot. Using the flag has been extremely controversial within my work. The flag is a symbol of freedom, and during a time where freedoms and rights are being stripped away, placing restraints on the flag, turning it into a bounded uterus, is more representative of the current day America than its original form. Roe v. Wade being overturned was a failure in the history of American human rights. Women are dying, children are being forced to carry their rapist babies, and silence is an act of complicity. Your art making fascists mad is a good sign you're doing the right thing. Get involved politically. Call your representatives, support your community, and speak out against wrongdoings, against genocide, against the current regression of human rights. That is the only step forward in making America the land of the free. Thank you so much.
Yep.
My name is Bill Franz. The three works with the children are mine. They're part of a series of 12 that I just finished. Each of the 12 has an image of a child. In each case, the child's face is somewhat hidden, and each has the same words, not a criminal. And they represent about 1 million undocumented immigrant kids. Undocumented immigrants is a big part of the last election. I think it was the hot topic for the current president. But the immigrants, I've met a lot of immigrants, I've got a chance to photograph a lot. The ones he described were nothing like anybody I've ever met. He talked about the prisons and mental institutions of South America being emptied and millions of violent people coming across the border. He was going to protect us from these millions of violent people and make sure they didn't eat our cats and dogs, and that he was going to get them out of the country. So he gets elected, and he has a problem because there aren't millions of violent criminals to round up. So he decides these kids and their parents are criminals. They've got a certain advantage for the president. There are millions of them, and they're easy to catch. You can catch them while they drop the kids off at school. You can catch them when they walk into church on Sunday morning. You can catch them when they go to work, or at work. Just go to the hardest jobs in any city that pay the lowest, and that's where their parents work. So he calls them criminal. The president himself has been called criminal many times. Each time, he's had constitutional rights to protect him. And if these kids were, and their parents were given their constitutional rights, I wouldn't have done this series. It's the first political thing I've ever done. You know, the president was not grabbed off the street by masked men and thrown into a van and taken off when he was called criminal. But that's what's happening. The president had lawyers to protect him. These people are being jumped from place to place to place, so their lawyers can't find them. President had due process rights. As he stood in front of a judge, he could ask for a continuance. He could marshal evidence to make his case. These people are given as little as 6 hours notice before they're thrown out. So that's why I did the piece.
Hi, my name is Angela Corson. I'm multidisciplinary artist and I live in Houston, Texas. I'm very honored to be part of this great exhibition with this piece called Lasting Impressions, made with porcelain sleeve. Lasting Impressions is my response to the way those in power often dismiss violence, framing it as a joke or a careless gesture. This piece confronts the imbalance of power and trauma and how society have the tendency to downplay or ignore harm. Thank you.
My name is Ann Corley Silverman, and I'm actually honored very much to be a part of this exhibit, which is fantastic and touches on so many important issues. I can say of myself, I'm a paper maker. I love the tactile quality of my process. I love the fact that the fibers of paper come from plants. And I've worked kind of in my practice and in my head with the space or the connection between the environment, the fibers, and the historical significance of paper in our cultural lives. The work that I have in here deals with how trees in particular have been threatened by wildfire, which was racking my soul. So that a lot of the tree forms in there are made of bark, actually from an invasive in my woods, which I try and keep under control. So nature has its way of fighting nature. And the other piece is a globe form that was a part of an installation. So I was transforming my own work into actually burning it. But through that process, I was taking these photographs of it while it was burning, while it was smoking, after it kind of was ashing. And I said to myself, this is our globe. We are doing this to our globe. Anyway, that's sort of it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tony J. Smith. I'm very thankful to have two paintings included in the 2025 We're Doing It All Wrong exhibition at Ed Dixon Gallery. My first piece is called No Child Left Behind. It's inspired by one of Gordon Parks' photographs. My work highlights the harsh choices and systems that surround poor communities, like guns, drugs, predatory businesses. These aren't just statistics to me. They're the landscape that many kids grow up in. The second piece is called Trad Wife Life. It's my response to the so-called trad wife movement, which is a romanticized return to a time when women were expected to shrink themselves to fit a man's comfort. To me, that's not nostalgia, it's a disaster. Please check out this important exhibition. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Patricia Anderson Turner. I'm an artist here in South Florida. I'm in my studio with my piece, the Georgia Gazette. First, I'd like to thank all the viewers, all of the artists, the jurors, and especially Ed Dixon for having this amazing exhibit. We're doing it all wrong. Now I'd like to read you my piece statement about what's going on in this work of 9 cradled panels. And it is as follows. 2 million captured Africans perished on the gruesome sail to the United States after capture in Western Africa. Overall, for every 100 Africans captured, 40% are estimated to have died either in Africa or on or during their horrific journey. The Georgia Gazette, Savannah's daily newspaper, documented the arrival of the survivors in Savannah in advertisements for the sale of the men, women, and children on the auction block. The purpose of my piece is not only to document the horrors of human cargo and subsequent enslavement, but to relate it to the turbulent times in which we live. After 400 years, through the 13th Amendment, Jim Crow, the 15th Amendment, the horrors and lynchings of the KKK, the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act, white supremacy, police brutality and murder, all the way to the Black Lives Matter movement, Black Americans continue to be redlined, murdered by gun violence, and doomed to poverty and poor education as a direct result of their history of white domination. Monetary reparations cannot erase this humanity, but we Americans, in all of our glorious colors, can begin a course correction at the ballot box. Let us begin by ending white silence and by voting only for those candidates who acknowledge our complete history and who will legislate for a better future. Without our vote, we are doomed. And I should add that in this year of 2025, our rights are eroding daily. We live in fear of arrest without due process, of imprisonment by unknown and masked so-called ICE agents, of being sent to a gulag in a foreign country. We are, indeed, repeating the crimes of the past, crimes against humanity. We must protest the outrage, write to our representatives, and most of all, vote while we still can. Thank you very much. PatriciaTurnerArt.com.
I'm from Cleveland, and my work is very personal. I mainly work with birds, or the idea of birds, because I don't really copy birds. I do abstract things. But every now and then, when I'm motivated, I take those personal feelings, and when the world gets really crazy and gets out of hand, sometimes I have to fight back. And the three works I have displayed in here still work with wood, but I've taken them and shaped them into the ideas of rebellion that I feel need to be addressed. And in what women's rights, it's a man's womb, it's a man's world, was my shock and horror of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And as a man, and a white man, I do have feelings about that. And in my life, since I was 13, where the law was changed or made, as I grew into adulthood, women kind of gravitated towards me to tell me their problems, and a couple of them were pregnant. And without getting too involved, I had to just listen. And that's why these works were made, because of my personal experience with counseling. And I'm not a counselor by any means, I'm just an artist. And it's very wonderful to be in this show, because I never thought I would have a venue to show these works, because they are so visceral. And it comes from a traditional sort of art that I do. I love carving on a, well, I use wood. I narrow my options down because I don't like using exotic woods. I use maple, cherry, and walnut. In the Appalachians, the lumber company I work with is a family, Yoder Lumber. They're Amish, and they do the best they can to replenish what they take and to weed out overgrown forest areas to get their wood. So I believe in management of our resources instead of just stopping using them. there has to be a way where we can manage our resources so that we can use them today and use them tomorrow. So with that, I thank you very much to be involved in this show. Like I say, these were really personal works that I never thought would be shown in the States. And thank you very much.
Hi, my name is William Barton, and this is my entry into the We're Doing It All Wrong exhibition. It's a painting I created called Thug Life. This painting is pretty much a conversation piece, and it speaks to the way people of color are perceived in this country, particularly people in sports, people of color in sports. So everyone on this piece is obviously an athlete besides Tupac, and I put Tupac on the piece because the phrase Thug Life is famously associated with Tupac, the rapper, throughout his rap career. But everyone else on this piece, started with Cam Newton. He was known to dance and dab and do the Superman. He was criticized for that, all the celebrating he was doing. The Fab Five were criticized for wanting to usher in longer shorts, and just their confidence and their swag, the way they acted, it wasn't seen before in college basketball. Richard Sherman was famously known for that interview that he did where he called out another player, and it was kind of awkward interview, but he was like yelling, and it was national TV because it was a big championship game. So he was criticized for that, the way he acted in that interview. John Thompson, he had the Georgetown teams of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the way they played, they were rough and they were aggressive, and they felt like they were defending themselves, but other people perceived them, a bunch of majority black players, as obviously, just being rough and, playing too aggressive. Malice in the Palace, if you know sports, you know about the Malice in the Palace and the brawl and the Madison Square Garden and everything that happened after those players, or the scrutiny that those players went through. Serena Williams, she was criticized for the way she looked, the way she acted, just pretty much expressing herself in any way. This one is focused on the Bad Boy Pistons, Isaiah Thomas and the rest of his teammates, the way they were perceived, how they played, with the aggression, the fouls, whatever. And Angel Reese, she came on the scene, and now she's criticized for pretty much doing anything. She can't do anything right to a lot of people. But the composition as a whole is based off a bandana, sticking with the thug theme. So I used the bandana, and the sections of a bandana, I took out the designs in them, and I replaced them with the players. So that's the design that you see. The inside is paisley design, these teardrop looking things. You can see those on the bandana as well. And the color scheme, I used the red, white, and blue because of the American flag and the American sports. The majority of these are American sports. And also the Crip and the Bloods, the famous gangs, their colors are famously the red and the blue, so that correlates as well. But that is the piece, Thug Life. Thank you.
This work here, Lost and Found, came on the heels of another project involving found objects and my love of spontaneous discovery in my wanderings around this great city. So I was in a heightened state of receptivity when I came upon a neon orange beanie in a really dejected state. And probably not everyone has this impulse when they see such a thing, but I was like, I have to resuscitate this beanie and make it wearable again. And I have to do this with as many other articles of clothing as possible. And the city obliged this impulse to no end. When I went out on my bike, I tried to make sure to bring plastic bags because it seemed I couldn't go a block without seeing another rain-soaked textile blob that I couldn't pass up. Once I got them home, I'd immerse them overnight in a sealed bucket of rubbing alcohol before running them through the washer. It was only at that point, in a lot of cases, that I even knew what I had. It was like opening a present. Oh, that was a scarf. This practice started as a bit of a game, but it wasn't long before the weight of what I was uncovering started to sink in. The stories these garments could tell were as likely ones of heartbreak as of minor inconvenience. And I didn't know how I was going to do whatever this was, justice, until I was folding a batch fresh from the laundry. And the tenderness of that act really crystallized something, and the project, the form it took, this kind of before and after this resuscitation, that's when it became clear that my job was to make them feel at home. And as I wrote in the statement that accompanies this work, I took the second photograph in the context I felt best showed due consideration: a coat rack for a garment, a shelf for a sweater, my hands for an orphaned baby sock. Each of these garments is an intimate stand-in for a person who has suffered a loss, as casual as an accidentally dropped hat, or as profound as homelessness, mental illness, and the countless ways a person can suffer or be mistreated. And attempts at restoration have fallen woefully inadequate, woefully short. Holes and stains remain, garments remain forever absent from their owners. This work points to the enduring grief of these losses, as well as the beauty that arises from making room for them in whatever ways we can. Thank you.
But yeah, again, it's just so much dehumanization going on, and that's almost at the root of every piece that's in here. So I'm sure I'll be doing it again next year. But I thank all the artists that were part of this year's exhibition, and thank you all for coming out, and everybody that's looking at this online, and hopefully you'll take the time to make a call, like some of the artists have already said, but any little thing you can do, and especially voting, is such a big deal. We see where not voting or being indifferent can lead us. So that's really all I have, but thanks.